Shalom, shalom, everyone. This is my Yael Vinya. I want to come to you with a segment called Feeling Unfulfilled. Feeling Unfulfilled. Let's go to the book of Matthew, the Gospel according to Matthew, chapter 1. We will start at verse 21. And she shall bring forth a son, and thou shalt call his name Jesus, for he shall save his people from their sins. Verse 22. Now all this was done that it might be fulfilled, which was spoken of the Lord by the prophet, saying, Behold, a virgin shall be with child, and shall bring forth a son, and they shall call his name Emmanuel, which being interpreted is God with us. Then Joshua, being raised from sleep, did as the angel of the Lord had bidden him. And he took unto him his wife, and he knew her not until she had brought forth her firstborn son. And he called his name Jesus. Now, first of all, we must do to see is this actual prophecy, a Messianic prophecy as they are commonly known. Now, if you have a reference Bible, I'm coming from the King James. This is the King James Reference Bible, and it has references letting you know where it's coming from. So, yes, see where the prophet spoke these words. It is in the book of Isaiah, chapter 7. But I'm going to start at verse 10. Isaiah chapter 7, verse 10. Then we're going to read down to where the prophecy is actually mentioned. Hallelujah. Moreover, Jehovah spake unto Asa, saying, Ask thee a sign of Jehovah thy God. Ask it neither in depths or in height above. But Asa said, I will not ask, neither will I tempt Jehovah. And he said, Hear ye now, O house of David. Is it a small thing for you to weary men? But will ye weary my God also? Therefore, the Lord himself will give you a sign. Behold, a virgin shall conceive and bear a son, and shall call his name Emmanuel. So we can plainly see this is where it's coming from. But now we have to ask our questions, be contextually honest, historically honest. Is this a Messianic prophecy? Is this a prophecy that is referring to Jesus? Now we have to ask the important question. Who was this sign given to? If we go back to verse 10 and 11, you can see that the prophet came to the king and said, Ask God a sign. So we can see that this sign is for King Asa to see. And now you have to ask yourself, was this king around when Jesus was born? And if you could be honest, you would know this king was not around when Jesus was born. The sign was for him to see. The sign was for him, for the people of his time. This was not speaking of some event that would happen hundreds of years later. So we must be honest, contextually and historically honest. This is not a prophecy speaking of Jesus of Nazareth at all. So based on this alone, we are feeling unfulfilled by this so-called fulfillment to a prophecy. Because looking back, we can see the prophet was not referring to Jesus of Nazareth. We just got to be honest, he wasn't. Now let's look at something else. that many people looked over. I looked over myself when I was a Christian. Let's look at verse 23, and then we will look at verse 25. Here's verse 23 of Matthew chapter 1. Behold, a virgin shall be with child and shall bring forth a son. They shall call his name Emmanuel, which is being interpreted is God with us. Now notice they will call his name Emmanuel. Verse 25. And he knew her not until she brought forth her firstborn son, and they called his name Jesus. Emmanuel and Jesus do not mean the same thing. So how are you going to bring up a verse talking about this was said to fulfill something, and then you name them something that don't even line up with the name that said they will call him? Emmanuel and Jesus is not equivalent names. They do not mean the same. They are plainly not the same. So how the prophecies state that this one will be called Emmanuel, then you say the fulfillment of it is someone being called a different name altogether. So once again, you can see why this so-called Messianic prophecy leaves many unfulfilled. Now let's do one more. Let's go to the book of Matthew, chapter 2, the Gospel of St. Matthew, chapter 2. Let's look at verse 14 through 15. In fact, I'm starting at 13 through 15. And when they were departed, behold, the angel of the Lord appeared to Joseph in a dream, saying, Arise and take the young child and his mother and flee into Egypt. And be thou there until I bring thee word. For Herod will seek the young child to destroy him. And when he arose, he took the young child and his mother by night and departed into Egypt, and was there until the death of Herod, that it might be fulfilled, which was spoken of the Lord by the prophet, saying, Out of Egypt have I called my son. Okay, so now they're saying this was done to fulfill something that was spoken by the prophets. Now, as I said before, you have a reference Bible. That reference most likely will be Hosea chapter 11 and verse 1. So yes, go there and see, is this an actual fulfillment? Hosea chapter 11 verse 1. When Israel was a child, then I loved him and called my son out of Egypt. I'm going to read it again because I don't know if you caught it. When Israel was a child, then I loved him and called my son out of Egypt. So we could plainly see this is not a prophecy at all. We're going to be honest. This is basically just recounting an event that already happened. And this event happened when Jehovah raised up Moses to bring his people out of Egypt. So this is not a prophecy speaking of some futuristic event. And we could plainly see the son that was called out of Egypt was Israel. This was not speaking of of a special individual who is the Messiah, who many believe is God in the flesh, who is the Son of God. Even though Israel is the Son of God, they are the firstborn of God. So we could actually be honest, just be honest. This verse is not a messianic prophecy speaking of someone that will come hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of years later speaking of one individual that will be the Messiah. It's not. We just need to be honest to the text and what's being said. This is not referring to a futuristic event. It's actually recounting an event that already happened. So how is it a prophecy? So once again, that's another Messianic prophecy that leaves meaning unfulfilled. Let's go to one more in Matthew, because there's meaning in the Gospel of Matthew. Let's go back to Matthew. Let us look at Matthew chapter 2. And yes, deal with verses 16 through 18. St. Matthew chapter 2, verses 16 through 18. And yes, see, is this a prophecy speaking of this event that occurred with Herod? Then Herod, when he saw that he was mocked of the wise men, was exceedingly wroth, and sent forth and slew all the children that were in Bethlehem, and in all the coasts thereof, from 2 years old and under, according to the time which he had diligently inquired of the wise men. 17, verse 17. Then was fulfilled that which was spoken by Jeremy the prophet, saying, In Ramah was there a voice heard, lamentations and weeping and great mourning, Rachel weeping for her children, and will not be comforted because they are not. So according to Matthew, this prophecy in verse 18 was fulfilled by Herod slaughtering the children in Bethlehem and the surrounding coast from 2 years old and down. So now let us take a trip back in time to when this was uttered by the prophet. Yes, see, is this without a shadow of a doubt a prophecy that was speaking of this event that we see here. Jeremiah or Jeremiah, chapter 31. Starting at verse 15. And we will read down a few more verses. But starting at verse 15, Jeremiah chapter 31, verse 15. Thus saith Yahweh, a voice was heard in Ramah, lamentation and bitter weeping, Rachel weeping for her children, refused to be comforted for her children because they were not. Thus said Yahweh, refrain thy voice from weeping and thy eyes from tears, for thy works shall be rewarded, said Yahweh. And they shall come again from the land of the enemy, and there is hope in thy end, said Yahweh, that thy children shall come again to their own border. This is referring to when the children of Israel was taken into captivity. They was taken into exile. This is not referring to a prophecy referring to what Herod would do to the kids 2 years old and under in the time of Jesus. So going back in time, we could plainly see this is not a mother weeping over her children that was slaughtered. This is plainly referring to mothers weeping and mourning over their children that have been taken away. But Jehovah said, stop your weeping, stop all that mourning, because I will gather them. I will bring them back from afar. So we can plainly see, being honest historically and contextually, This is not referring to what Herod did in the Gospel of St. Matthew. So once again, that is another so-called Messianic prophecy that leaves us feeling unfulfilled. So I will close with that. This is your brother Mayael Ben Yah. Shalom, love, and blessings. And do your due diligence and research. Hallelujah.